Well, good morning, church family. Pastor Chris here with you for our Hope for the Week devotional. It's my honor to be with you this morning as we continue to journey through the scriptures and pull out nuggets of hope and truth that are applicable to our everyday life. Church family, I want to start our morning by saying we miss you terribly. You have been on our mind and in our thoughts, and I know that for myself and for all of our other pastors and ministry leaders, we cannot wait until we are back together in person, able to worship our God together. And as we prepare our heart and our mind to worship God, whether we are still far or as we get close together, I want to share just a quick passage of scripture with us this morning. This comes out of the book of Colossians, which is written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Colossae. And as he writes as someone who senses a bit of urgency, a bit of desiring to be together with the church. And again, it is so applicable to what's going on in our day and time today. But this comes out of chapter 1 of the book of Colossians, and I'm going to read 3 verses. Starting in verse 21, it says, "Once you were alienated and hostile in your mind, expressed through evil actions." Now, real quick, what Paul is doing is setting up this idea that you and I have been born into a world that is filled with sin, and we can see this quite easily today. You can turn on any news channel, pick your preferred one, and you will find that there are stories that are taking place of evil atrocities in our world. That when we look all over the news, we look all over the world, we see that there are things that are taking place that are wicked and evil. We live in a world that is like this. But one of the things I want us to keep in mind is that we are not necessarily sinners because we sin, but we sin because we are sinners. And the difference is that out of a nature that is within us, this is what Paul is talking about, these inner desires to do evil, we do in fact do evil. But there's so much hope. And I love the next word that Paul says. It is the big, old, beautiful, glorious but. Now, I know if you're young and you're probably giggling, but track with me. Verse 22 says, "But now God has reconciled you by his physical body through his death, to present you as holy, faultless, and blameless before him." Here's the big, beautiful but. Jesus dies for your sin. That Jesus lives the life we could not live and dies the death we rightly deserve. And through his life, death, and eventual resurrection, he takes all of the sin and the sinner's nature that we have, and he dies in our place, and he raises to life, and he pays the penalty in full. And as a result, Paul says he reconciles us back to God. That there is no longer anything that is separating us from the love of God. But you might be thinking, oh, okay, that's great and all, Pastor Chris, but I've trusted in Jesus. I love Jesus, and yet I still have sin in my life. Well, so do I. Because every day we have to choose to die to sin and live for Christ. Every day we must make a conscious decision to lay aside ourself and our ego and our preferences and the things that I want above everybody else, and we need to lay those to the side, and we need to begin to pick up the cross and live like Jesus. And when we do, every day we become more and more and more made into the image and likeness of God. That our sinner's nature is being pushed to the side, and our God-ordained nature to love God and love others is coming to the front. So Paul concludes this little thought by saying, if indeed you, church, you remain grounded and steadfast in your faith, and you are not shifted away from the hope of the gospel that you have heard, then this gospel that we have proclaimed to you and all of creation that is under heaven, you and I, as Paul says, we will become a servant of it. that we will become a servant to the gospel, and that the hope of the gospel, this good news of Jesus Christ, will drive us away from the things that are contrary to the good and perfect and pleasing will of God, and would begin to steer us into the things that are in fact beautiful and pleasing to God. So right now, as we look at the world that sometimes seems hopeless and filled with evil and atrocity, the good news of the gospel is that Jesus has died in our place, and he affords to us the opportunity to be better people, people who love others and care for others and lay aside our own preferences and ego so that we could love people right where they're at. So today, church family, my hope for you is that no matter who you come into contact with, whether they are people you know and love, or they're people you don't know and don't love, or anyone in between, that you would begin to lay aside yourself in order that you could see that as Christ has died for you, we are willing to lay down ourselves and love others. So church, may we go forth as those who have the hope of the gospel of Christ rooted firmly in our hearts, and we go forth and love God and love others. So this is my prayer for you, church family, wherever you find yourself, that you would love God and love others today. So we love you again, and we miss you terribly. Go in peace today. Take care, everyone. God bless.